When you think of Brazil, what comes to mind? Football, the Amazon rainforest, carnival, tropical weather, caipirinhas. Brazil is the 6th largest wine producer in the southern hemisphere with 81,000 hectares of vineyards and 1,100 wineries. Yet most people, including myself, never connected Brazil with wine. But maybe it's time to change that. So this is going to be my first tasting of Brazilian wines, especially because many of you asked me to do so. So let's dive in. The first wines arrived in Brazil in the 16th century, but it was not easy cultivating the vine in the country's mainly hot and humid climate. More successful than the fragile European Vitis vinifera varietals were the sturdy and high-yielding hybrids like Concord, Isabel and Niagara, and even today most of the vineyards in Brazil are actually planted to non-vinifera varietals. However, Brazil also offers the right growing conditions for vinifera varietals if you look carefully. The country is huge and the climatic conditions are very different, especially between the north and the south. 90% of the Brazilian wine production takes place in the state of Rio Grande do Sul. This is Brazil's southernmost state and it's neighboring the more famous wine growing countries Argentina and Uruguay. The country's wine industry is focused on sparkling wine, but its 10 different growing regions cover quite a lot of ground, and the most popular Vitis vinifera varieties allow for the production of many different styles, with Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot and Pinot Noir being the most widely planted red grapes, and Chardonnay, Moscato Bianco and Glera being the most widely planted whites. My team has put together a lineup of different Brazilian wines for me to taste. Will I like them or not? Let's find out. Alright, this is one of those tastings where I actually know pretty much nothing about the producers, the wine growing regions, the wine styles. I'm a blank sheet when it comes to Brazilian wine, so you actually might know more about those wines than me. But I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm a master of wine, but the wine world is massive and you can't know everything about every place in the wine world. And I'm actually doing something about it. I'm learning. So let's dive in. So the first wine is the Don Guerino Brut Chardonnay from the Serra Gaucha, which is in the south of Brazil. The Monte family, who's behind this wine, arrived in the 1880s in Brazil from Italy. They set up and created this winery, and now they're producing, amongst other wines, this sparkling. This is 100% Chardonnay, and they harvest the grapes in the second week of January, which is pretty early in the growing cycle. Obviously, January is the summer in the southern hemisphere, but early January is early for harvesting grapes, that's for sure. But I'm guessing that's because otherwise the grapes would just be too sweet for the production of a decent sparkling wine. They also cool the grapes when they enter the winery, and they harvest the full bunches in order to be able to press them more gently at the winery. This sparkling wine is not made following the traditional method, so there's no second fermentation in bottle. Instead, they use the Chamat method, so they use pressure tanks, so-called autoclave, in which the wine, the second fermentation actually takes place. So this is where the bubbles develop, and this only lasts 4 months in the case of this wine. So usually wines made following the Chamat method are a little bit more fruit driven, less yeasty, and they can be pretty good. I mean, that's not necessarily a qualitative thing. Obviously, I mean, most of the great sparkling wines of the world are made using the traditional method, but I sometimes also like a good Chamat method wine. So the wine has a light color. The bubbles are fine. They are present. There are bubbles there. They are not super intense, but this is also because this is not a sparkling wine glass, so you don't see the bubbles as much as you would in a sparkling wine glass. On the nose, this is quite nice. I mean, it has some real bright apple and lemon aromas. There's a little bit of yeastiness, but really not a lot. It's more fruit driven, but really precise and clean. On the palate, the wine is really fresh. The acidity is quite crunchy and intense. It feels like there's quite a bit of malic acid, so the more harsh or more pronounced acidity. And the alcohol is actually very low here. We had 11.5% of alcohol, which is yeah, pretty low. Yeah, this is a nice and lively wine. I quite enjoy it. I mean, I'd say this is an 85 point wine. For me, it's really good, but not extraordinary. Quite light, fresh, and revitalizing. You know, I collect old wine books, and one of the most insightful books when it comes to looking into the history of wine is Hugh Johnson's World Atlas of Wine. I obviously had to look through it when researching for this video, and most of the things that he actually writes about Brazil are still relevant today. He also writes that Cinzano has a vineyard near Recife, only 10 degrees from the equator, which produces 2 grape crops a year. The area is dry and the vines are forced to go dormant and make new buds by taking off the irrigation. This is an interesting point when it comes to the production of wines along the equator. There, it's actually possible to do 2 or 3 grape harvests a year. So the vine would actually continue producing fruit under those temperature conditions if you don't intervene in the vineyard. So by cutting off the irrigation, the water supply, you actually introduce dormancy, which would normally take place in the vineyard as temperatures drop. So winter starts and the vine goes to sleep. But as it never really gets cold along the equator, you have to find other measures in order to get the vine into the right growing cycle. What is also quite nice about this book is the fill level on that glass. I mean, who fills their wine glass this high? This is just wrong. I think even in the 80s, this was not the right level. The next wine is another sparkling, the Salton Brut Rosé, also from the Serra Gaucha. The Salton family started making sparkling wine in 1933. It apparently became the favorite sparkling wine of the president, and that's how it all took off. This is a blend of Pinot Noir and Trebbiano, of all grape varieties. Kind of a weird mix, to be honest. And this apparently is also a Chamat method wine, even though it doesn't mention it on the label. The climate in the Serra Gaucha is apparently subtropical, and the vineyards are located at a higher altitude at around about 650 meters. So that obviously really helps mitigate the impact of the heat, the high temperature. If you go up in altitude, temperatures will drop. So the color is quite dark for a rosé sparkling wine, especially as it is Pinot Noir, which is normally a light colored grape variety. So this is quite intense. The fruit flavor is also quite intense. There's quite a lot of cherry and strawberry flavor coming through. So quite fruit driven, not much yeastiness at all. On the palate, this is quite juicy. The acidity is more moderate. The sugar level apparently is between 13 and 14 grams per liter. So it wouldn't be Brut over here in Europe at least. So the term Brut might signify something else in Brazil, but over here it's up to 12 grams per liter. So this is more extra dry, quite juicy, quite rich, a little fruity. I think this is actually something a lot of people will enjoy because it's just so accessible, fruity, light, and lively. But for me, it just lacks depth. I don't think it's really exciting. I'm going to rate this 81 points. I think it's a good sparkling wine, but not necessarily one that I would want to drink. I'm still not sure whether I should travel through the vineyards of Brazil, but if I do, I know that the sponsor of this video, NordVPN, will travel with me. NordVPN allows me to travel safely as I can browse the internet protected from censorship, online threats, and surveillance even at airports, train stations, and hotels. When using Nord, I also get to access content from all around the world, bypassing geo restrictions while enjoying fast internet speeds, and I get to watch my favorite German show in Brazil. With NordVPN's plans, all of my devices, my laptop, my PC, smartphone, and tablet are covered, all with one account, ensuring that I'm safe no matter which tool I use. Right now, NordVPN is offering a special deal for my viewers, including a 30-day money-back guarantee. So click on the link in the description in order to get a discount plus 3 months of NordVPN and surf safer today. Thank you NordVPN for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to the wines. The next wine is the 2022 Pizzato Semillon Vino Fino Branco Secco. So this is a still white wine, and it's from the Vale dos Vinhedos region. On the label there's a little map, and you can see that the Vale dos Vinhedos is in the south of Brazil, so in the same region where the sparkling wines were from. The Pizzato family behind this wine came from Veneto in the 1870s, and they started planting vineyards in that region in the second half of the 20th century, and now they make their own wine. They use quite a lot of Italian grape varieties, but Semillon is obviously more of a French grape variety, one that I actually really like. So this wine was fermented in barrels, in oak barrels and in stainless steel tank. It did malolactic fermentation, so I'm expecting something a little bit more intense, creamy and rich, but let's find out. So yeah, I mean, the color is certainly quite golden, quite dark for white wine. This was also aged for 12 months in barriques, which will also add a little bit of color, allow the wine to get a little bit of oxygen. So yeah, you can definitely smell the oak. So the wine smells of apricots and peach, and you also have this creaminess, the roastedness. It smells a little bit like apricot tart maybe. There's also a little bit of vanilla flavor coming through, some baked goods, some brioche. So it's all quite rich and intense. There are also those waxy notes that I often get from Semillon. So I actually really like that nose. All right. On the palate, it's actually more structured than I would have expected. It smelled so rich, but on the palate there's good grip. The acidity is actually present, maybe a little harsh. The alcohol is at 12.8, so not a lot of alcohol for a Semillon. So it's much leaner than what I would have thought just from smelling the wine. There's quite a lot of bitterness there, and I find that a little too bitter, a little rough. But it's still an interesting wine. I think if you pair this with food, this bitterness would go away a little bit. But yeah, just judging it on its own, I would say this is an 88-point wine. A really good wine. A wine that shows promise, but not necessarily a perfect and not really a harmonious wine. It lacks a little bit of harmony there. I added the next wine just spontaneously. This is actually a bottle that was sent to me by one of you guys for me to kind of taste it. And I didn't say that I'm going to put this into a video. I usually say that I'm not going to put it into a video, but I found this interesting and I just kind of wanted to, just to squeeze it in. I mean, it fits into the topic. It's from Brazil. It's the 2021 Vinhas do Tempo Chardonnay from Monte Bello do Sul. I really don't know much more about it. It has 11% of alcohol. It kind of, check this out. It has this mark here. So that kind of indicates to me that it was bottled by hand. The cork was pushed in with one of those machines, which is actually something I appreciate. It's kind of handcrafted. It came with this nice little note, which I really liked. So let's give it a taste. You know, I'm always a little worried if I put a wine like that into a tasting, because I know the person who made it sent it to me, and if I review it off camera, I can be really honest about it. If I review it on camera, it feels a little odd. That's why I don't really like to put those wine in. I just took the risk here, and I actually didn't think this would be really great. I mean, I thought maybe this is a nice wine and it fits into the tasting. It kind of looks like a small scale product, which is obviously not a bad thing at all. But yeah, I just didn't know what to expect. But this is really interesting. This actually is really new wave Chardonnay with a slight reductiveness. There's a little bit of flinty struck match kind of character. But there's also really bright fruit flavor there. There's a little bit of oak there, but not in a pronounced way. It's all really well integrated, really well balanced. And on the palate, there's actually so much liveliness, grippiness, fresh acidity, a long length. And that at 11% alcohol, which I find quite surprising. There's also this soy sauce kind of meatiness coming through, which is quite interesting. So yeah, this is really good. I think you could put this into a Chardonnay tasting and people would wonder whether this is from a high quality producer from Burgundy, maybe from Jura, maybe from somewhere cool in California. So this is a really exciting wine. So I'm going to rate this 91 points. I think it is eye-opening when it comes to the potential for Chardonnay in Brazil. I don't really know whether you can buy this anywhere. I guess it's not available in Germany. Maybe it is. But yeah, this is great stuff. Thank you, Daniel. The next wine is the first red of this tasting, the Casa Pedrucci Reserva Tinto 2018 from the Serra Gaucha. Gilberto Pedrucci studied enology and then worked for several wine producers in Brazil. He was also the president of the Enology Association of Brazil. And then he set up his own winery, which is this one. This wine is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, and it was aged in barriques for 6 months. Yeah, I mean, it's a dark colored red, not super dark, but the color is dark ruby. It's very fruit driven. There's a lot of blackberry, elderberry kind of flavor, not a lot of oak notes. The fruit flavor is a little bit stewed. It's not very complex on the nose. On the palate, this is more light and peppery. It's a little bland, to be honest. I'm not a big fan. I mean, it's quite a drop-off in terms of quality following that Chardonnay. But yeah, it's just a really easygoing red, a little bit bitter. Doesn't have a lot to offer. I'm going to rate this 80 points. I think it's good, well made, clean, but really a little bit boring. The next one is the 2013 Lidio Carraro Quorum Grande Vindima from Vale dos Vinhedos. What I noticed right from the start is it has this golden medallion here and it says 93 Pontos. And it says Jancis Robinson on here, which is a bit strange. I mean, Jancis Robinson usually scores in a 20-point system. It also says 18 score below that. So I don't know whether they just converted it themselves or whether Jancis scored this on the 100-point scale. I'm not really sure, but it's kind of weird. The Carraro family apparently has a long history in wine, but this winery was only founded in 2001. The wine is a blend of 40% Merlot, 25% Cabernet Sauvignon, 20% Malbec, and 15% Cabernet Franc. There's actually quite a lot of information on the back label. It also says that this is from basaltic clay soil, but I think it's supposed to be basaltic clay soil. And they have a yield of 35 hectoliters per hectare, which is pretty low, I would say. The wine is dark in color. This is definitely dark ruby, a little cloudy, and it's still pretty fresh. I mean, considering that this is 12 years old, this obviously has some garnet reflexes, so it shows a little bit of aging, but the nose is still pretty bright and fruit driven. There is cassis aroma, a little bit of blackberries, a little bit of spice. The winemaking notes for this wine don't mention barrique, but I think it was aged in barrique, but I can't say for sure. I mean, it just says stainless steel tank and then tank again. But this feels like there's a little bit of oak flavor, and also the texture seems to remind me of a wine that was aged in oak. It has grippy tannins, good freshness. There's a little bit of beefiness there as well, a little umami kind of flavor. So there's quite a lot of stuff going on there. And I must say this is a really good wine. I will rate this 92 points. I think it's pretty delicious, quite complex, quite complete. So great stuff. The last one of the tasting is the 2022 Miolo Lote 43, which is also from the Vale dos Vinhedos. This is a blend of Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. And Miolo appears to be one of the biggest producers of quality wine in Brazil. The business was started by Giuseppe Miolo, who came from Veneto in Italy. at the end of the 19th century, started with a small business and then kind of grew it into a winery that now has more than 1,000 hectares of vineyards. I mean, those 1,000 hectares, I think, are not all owned by Miolo. They source from 1,000 hectares of vineyards, but it's a massive, massive production, obviously. I think Lote 43 was the name of the parcel that Giuseppe Miolo first purchased. So that's kind of the original kind of homeland of the winery. All right, this is definitely also a really concentrated, rich red, more ruby, more intense color, because this is just the younger wine, but really, really dark. The flavor is intense and I quite like it. I mean, it smells of ripe cherries, crème de cassis, so it's definitely really concentrated. There's a little bit of oak flavor coming through as well, sawdust, slight vanilla notes, but it's really well integrated into the fruit. All right, on the palate, this is juicy, rich, intense, really polished and velvety, really nice. I mean, this is very accessible, really open, fruit driven. So it's more of an international style. I think in a blind tasting, it would be difficult to place this because it could come from many different places, but it's really well crafted. Yeah, I'm going to rate this 91 points. I think it's a delicious wine. Not the most characterful wine, not the most Brazilian wine, but it's really nice and juicy and just kind of warm red. I've never tasted Brazilian wine, at least not that many in one row. So this was quite interesting. This lineup is obviously not representative of the whole Brazilian wine industry. I mean, most of those wines are not really exported, I guess, but it was an interesting lineup showing many different styles and expressions of Brazilian wines. My two favorites were pretty clear. I mean, this Chardonnay was just delicious, a really exciting wine. And the Lidio Carraro, even though I still don't really know how Jancis gave this 93 points as opposed to 18 points. But anyways, this also was really great wine. Wine with lots of character, really interesting wine. Wine that kind of gets you interested in learning more about the wines from that country. Most of the wines from the lineup were from Vale dos Vinhedos, so it would be interesting to see what the other regions have to offer. But this was a pretty good starting point and it definitely has piqued my interest. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please like it down here, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, have you ever tasted Brazilian wine? Let me know what your experiences were down below in the comments. But whatever you do, stay thirsty.